Hello everyone, I am Humaira from Apar Health. Today I'm going to discuss ICH GCP R3 guidelines. This is a draft version of the guidelines, still to be finalized, and it's open for suggestions and public opinion. In this presentation, we'll see what are the revisions that have happened to the guidelines and a little bit about the review procedure which is followed by the ICH steering committee to bring in this kind of a revision. Before we start with the guidelines, if we look at the history of E6 guidelines, the first E6 guideline came up in the year 1996 and it was approved by the steering committee. Then the first revision of the same guideline happened in the same year, 1996, and there were some editorial corrections that were made to it. And the second revision happened in the year 2016. So a number of changes were brought in to the guideline in this revision. The third revision, which is happening now, and it has been endorsed by the members of the ICH Assembly, and it's under step 2, and it's released for public consultation. Let us first of all understand the process by which ICH establishes the revision of any concept paper or any guideline. Now it starts with endorsement of a new topic. So the ICH Assembly endorses a new topic. Then an informal working group, we call it IWG, is established to develop the concept paper. So they are responsible for the development of the concept paper, and then further the ICH Management Committee approves the final concept paper. Once it is approved, the establishment of the expert working group happens, and the expert working group are responsible for taking around or building up the guidelines and looking into the inputs, public inputs, and finally implementing it. So the first step taken up by the expert working group is that they build consensus around the ethical technical document, whichever document is, if it's a new document, it's a new guideline that is coming up, or it's a guideline that already exists and the revision has to happen to it. The step 2, the ICH parties reach consensus on the technical document, and then the ICH regulators adopt the draft guidelines. Then we have the draft guidelines. Now these draft guidelines, the one we have currently with R3, the third step is that regulatory consultation and discussion happens, and this is the opportunity for public input. Then ICH considers public input and updates technical document as appropriate. So whatever inputs have been taken, if there is further change to be made to the guidelines or anything is to be added, that is done. Then comes step 4, that regulators adopt this ICH harmonized guidelines. So after step 3, the guidelines are harmonized, or we call them harmonized because now that they are the complete set of guidelines where inputs have been taken and all the revisions have happened. That is the step 4. And after step 4 is the implementation part. The guideline is implemented, and ICH monitors how the guideline is used and if any further updates are required with the same document. So this is the process happening with each guideline, each new concept paper. Now, the E6R3 guidelines, which the expert working group is working on. So they are revising it. That is, they are revising the R2 guidelines, and now we will have the new version, that is R3. And this has come up with a view to address the application of GCP principles to the increasingly diverse trial set and data sources. There have been quite an advancements in the different types of trials that are being conducted and the different types of data sources that are being used in clinical trials. So Annexure 1, it has two annexures are being prepared. Annexure 1 is intended to provide information that how the principles can be appropriately applied to clinical trials. And Annexure 2 work will be progressed in parallel to Annexure 1 once Annexure 1 reaches or crosses that step 2 in the ICH process of ICH review. Now, if we look at the principles, we know that clinical trials are very much fundamental part of clinical research. And clinical trials support the development of new medicines and use of existing medicines. And this guideline is being developed to encourage that thoughtful consideration and planning to address specific and potentially some unique aspects of individual clinical trials. Now, the principles are intended to support, more efficient approaches to the clinical trial. For example, we can say digital technologies. Then, in digital technologies is artificial intelligence. That is the buzzing word around, and that's coming up in each and every sector. And no doubt, healthcare and research all along, it is affecting or it is impacting that part also. Then machine learning, they may expand the possible approaches to trial conduct, definitely. And such technologies enable the use of a variety of relevant data sources in clinical trial. So we know that digital technologies are becoming a part of healthcare. So it's very important to review the guidelines or update the guidelines in purview of those developments which are happening in the field of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So the use of technology, we know, should adapt to fit the participant characteristics and the trial design. So if you're using a particular technology, then it should fit in that criteria of when we design a trial, how it is going to fit in, or the participants that are participating in the trial, how are they going to use the technology, or how is suppose any researcher going to use that technology so that it does not cross any borders of ethics or it does not harm the subject in any way. So guidelines are very important. So these technologies enable those who are designing and conducting the trial to include relevant patient population. And they should be, we know that clinical trials should be designed to protect the rights, safety, and well-being of the participants and assure the reliability of the results. And we know that trial designs and processes should be there to evaluate, to minimize the unnecessary complexity and burden. Coming to the first GCP principle, and it talks about the conduct of trials in accordance with the ethical principles. And that has the origin in Declaration of Helsinki, good clinical practices, and the regulatory requirements. So all the trials should be conducted as per the guidelines that have been given, the ethical guidelines, and of course the guidelines like GCP guidelines and the regulatory requirements of a specific country. Why? Because right, safety, well-being of the subject is important. It is to be reviewed periodically from time to time. Any risks or inconveniences should be weighed against the anticipated benefits. And whenever we're designing a clinical trial, a scientific goal and purpose should be carefully considered. Further, the person who is conducting the trial should be qualified. Okay, and the confidentiality of information and the identity of the subject should be protected. This is what the first principle is talking about. The second principle is about informed consent, which is an important and integral part of the ethical conduct of a clinical trial. So the consent should be voluntary, it should be documented, and the participant should be well informed before taking that consent or the second principle is talking about the importance of informed consent, and this is an integral part of the clinical trial, and each participant should be participating only and when the consent is voluntary, and the consent process should ensure that the participant is well informed and his participation is documented in the informed consent form. The third principle is about the clinical trial should be subject to review by the institutional review board or the independent ethics committee. So whenever a trial is to be conducted, it is to be reviewed by the IRB. The protocol is to be reviewed, and once a favorable opinion is obtained, the trial is started. Periodic review is also important, that the IRB IEC will conduct periodic review to assess the appropriate conduct of the trial. The fourth principle talks about the trial should be scientifically sound for its intended purpose, and it should be based on robust and current scientific knowledge and approaches. So all the information, the non-clinical and the clinical information, should be available on the investigational product before the actual conduct of the trial starts. It should be scientifically sound, and the knowledge about the investigational drug should be thorough, and there should be a periodic review of the current scientific knowledge and approaches to determine whether adjustments to the trial are needed, since new or unanticipated information may arise once the trial has begun. So it does happen that the trial has started and some new information about the drug comes up, right? So then that needs to be incorporated, or some changes need to be made to the trial for that purpose. The fifth principle talks about clinical trials should be designed and conducted by qualified individuals. So this is the basic requirement, that individuals who are participating in the trial, who are conducting the trial, they may be a physician, they may be scientists, ethicists, statisticians, technology experts. All these individuals in the trial should be qualified by education, training, and experience to perform the respective tasks. The sixth principle talks about quality should be built into the scientific and the operational design of the and the conduct of the trial. So if we want a quality trial, that means the processes which through which the trial has to move on and operate, they should be of quality. So the quality and the amount of information generated during the trial should be sufficient to support a good decision making. So whatever data is generated and the information we are collecting out of it, that should be good enough to help us make a sound decision about the effectiveness of the drug or the treatment plan. So factors which are very critical to the quality, we should identify them. And we talk about quality by design. It means the whatever protocol or whatever processes we are using, it should be of quality. the designing of the protocol should be of good quality, and the processes which are being conducted throughout the trial, or which are going to be conducted throughout the trial, they should be of quality. And definitely there should be strategies implemented to avoid, detect, and address serious non-compliance, because non-compliance becomes one of the important factors which can lead or invalidate the trial, and the recurrence of it should always be prevented, especially through the GCP guidelines. The seventh principle is about clinical trial processes, measures, approaches should be proportionate to the risk to participants and the reliability of the trial results. We know the drug is risky, then we should have processes and we should have appropriate measures on the trial so that we can handle that risk. We can manage that risk. Okay, it may be just a risk of an adverse event, which we anticipate may happen. So we should have the procedures and the processes in, placed in such a way so that we are able to handle that. We're able to manage without causing discomfort to the participant in the trial. So trial processes should be proportionate to the risk inherent in the trial. Risk beyond those of standard medical care should be focus of consideration. So we generally know this drug which is used as the standard of care, what are the risks associated, what are the side effects associated with the drug. But the one which is an investigational product, we are not 100% sure about the kind of adverse events it may cause or harm it may cause. So that should be our main focus. So quality factors should be prioritized at the time of trial design, and those that are critical to the trial. Risks which have an impact on the quality factors should also be managed properly in the trial. Now, the eighth principle is about the protocol. So the clinical trials should be described in a clear, concise, and operationally feasible protocol. So the more clear the protocol is, the more concise it is, the better way the trial is going to run. So this is a fundamental component to run a trial successfully and for the protection of the subjects which are participating in the trial, and of course to generate reliable results at the end. So it should be scientifically sound. It should support the key objectives of the trial, and it should it should be the trial protocol or the as the plans of the or the documents of the protocol execution, like statistical analysis plan, data monitoring, should be clear, concise, and operationally feasible. Now, the ninth principle is about the reliable results. So clinical trials should generate reliable results. So whatever information we get from the trial or is generated out of the clinical trial, that should be sufficient, and we should have the confidence in that information to support a good decision making. And the systems and processes that help ensure the quality of the information generated from the clinical trial and the reliability of the trial should be implemented. Then the tools that we're using to data capture or for the management, for analysis, should be fit for the purpose. And they should capture the information required by the protocol and should conform to the principles that ensure reliable results. The 10th principle talks about the digital technologies and the digital systems that are being used. Now, the digital systems used in a clinical trial should consider critical factors to their quality, and they should be fit for the purpose. So that means validation of these systems, data protection, IT, security, user management. These are important elements that have to be addressed. The trials should incorporate efficient and well-controlled processes for managing information for appropriate management of the data integrity, traceability, protection of the personal information, thereby allowing the accurate reporting, interpretation, and verification of the clinical trial data. So that if we are using digital technologies, we are using artificial intelligence, we are using softwares to collect the data or information from the patients, then they should be fit for the purpose, they should be properly validated, and they should not be the cause of any harm or to the subjects or to the end result of the trial. And another important factor is that whatever clinical trial information is retained through these digital technologies, they should be secure. Okay, and they should be securely retained by the sponsor and investigator for the required period of time, or as per the regulatory guidelines, whatever time period is there mentioned for that period, the data should be retained. Because that information, that data will help us reconstruct the trial once required, and also ensure reliability of the results. So the transparency of clinical trials and drug development includes registration. So the registration of the clinical trials is another important aspect wherein the international clinical trial registry is there, wherein the trials are registered to be transparent enough to show the conduct and what were the results of the trial in the end. The 10th principle is about the responsibilities and the roles of each person participating in the trial, or the stakeholders of the trial. Like, for example, the sponsors, the investigators, that should be properly documented. The overall responsibility of the trial lies with the investigator, but definitely he may delegate some or all the tasks to people assigned, and there should be proper agreements to clearly define the roles, tasks, and responsibilities for the clinical trial, and they should be documented appropriately. Now, the 11th principle is about the investigational product. The manufacture of the investigational product should happen as per the good manufacturing guidelines or GMP guidelines, and its storage, its shipping, handling should happen as per specified, and the use of the investigational product will happen as per the protocol. So labeling, manufacturing of the investigational product is done in a way so that it maintains blinding and treatment assignment where applicable. It should be labeled properly as per the regulatory requirement. And of course, risk-based approach should be considered when implementing that proportionate measure to ensure GMP, and appropriate shipping and handling of the investigation product should be managed. These were the principles of the third revision of our E6 guidelines, and they have been expanded a bit as compared to the previous principle. Now, the Annexure 1 also has information about the Institutional Review Board or the Independent Ethics Committee. What is the role? What are the responsibilities of IRB? In detail, it talks about the investigators' responsibilities, education, training, experience, conduct, and a list of responsibilities in the document. Similarly, the responsibilities of the sponsor are also discussed under the same annexure. And in the same section, And another aspect is data governance, investigator and the sponsor. So actually, this section provides guidance to investigators and sponsors on appropriate management of the data integrity, traceability, and security, thereby allowing the accurate reporting, verification, and interpretation of the clinical trial-related information. So what are the appropriate management techniques that should be followed by the investigator and the sponsor? They are mentioned in the data governance section. Then there are a few appendices, like in Appendix A, the details about the investigator's brochure are there. Appendix B is about clinical trial protocol and protocol amendments. And Appendix C is about essential records for the conduct of the clinical trial. This brings me to the end of this presentation. Thank you for your patient listening. Thank you very much.